The coronavirus continues to terrorize the world and particularly this nation. We're on the verge of a huge pandemic, a huge plague. We've had others, yellow fever, bubonic plague, other things like that. But this is very, very serious. And obviously, the stock market is being rocked as a result of it. It actually threatens the reelection of President Donald Trump. And of course, the Democrats are jumping on the bandwagon. But quite apart from politics, there's a human aspect of this, and that's the risk to you and your family. We need to start preparing, not just medically, but legally, in terms of how to fight what's happening, because people's damages are going to need to be paid for infecting or being exposed to this potentially fatal virus. Now, let's back up. There have been articles in the last week or so that it was a Chinese military biological weapon facility in Wuhan that accidentally released this virulent strain of the coronavirus. Now, that's totally believable. We know that Wuhan is where the Chinese have their military biological weapon facility. The Chinese shut down the entire city before anybody even knew what was going on. The Chinese government obviously has a very poor record, to put it nicely, of telling the truth. By the way, I like Chinese people. It has nothing to do with that. But the government in China is evil. We know that. And the United States really is keeping a closed mouth about this whole thing, including the Trump administration. And I believe the reason that it's not being exposed that this was a military accident is the fact that we have so many ongoing negotiations with China. We're seeking to curtail the nuclear proliferation in North Korea. In fact, just today, 2 missiles were fired off by the dictator of North Korea. Very provocative. We have trade negotiations going on. There are other factors involved. This appears to be a cover-up. Now, it's not inconceivable that this happened. We know that, for instance, after 9/11, we had anthrax attacks. I was subjected to that, and so was my family, and so were people in Washington, D.C. Turns out that the strain of anthrax that was being trained against the United States started first in South Florida and then worked its way up to Washington, D.C. with the postal workers who died, 8 of them. I wound up representing them and their families. That was an American strain. It had been given to Saddam Hussein by George H.W. Bush, Donald Rumsfeld, and Dick Cheney. It came back to harm us. In fact, the FBI covered up the cause of it. They blamed 2 people for it that had nothing to do with releasing that anthrax virus. One of them committed suicide. That's how terrorized he was, for being fingered by the FBI for covering up for their incompetence. And another was a South African. It happens. There was, in fact, also a Hollywood movie years ago, decades ago, called The Andromeda Strain, where fictionalized bioweapon was released from a facility out west, killed cattle, killed a number of people. I believe firmly that this is the Chinese government behind it. It was an error. Now, here's what's interesting and here's what's important, is that if this was a biological weapon, it would be outlawed by the Geneva Convention. It would be outlawed by other international treaties. And it would therefore be a weapon of mass destruction, not subjecting the communist government in China to any immunity for what went on. So what I'm proposing to do is to bring a class action or even individual actions for those people who have been exposed. We know a number of Americans already have been exposed to this. Americans that were on cruise ships in Japan, others now in Oregon and Washington State, in New York City, in Florida, in California, and around the country. I hope that they will contact me, because at Freedom Watch, we will bring lawsuits for them against the Chinese government for the damage, not just in terms of what can happen health-wise, but in terms of negligent infliction of emotional distress and anything else that may result, PTSD or whatever, from the fear of contracting this, you and your family. So I call upon those Americans who are affected, all Americans, to support Freedom Watch. As usual, we're the first ones that are out there. We're your line of defense. We will bring lawsuits against the Chinese government for this. And we will use discovery to uncover the cause, because the United States government knows. They know the cause. But they're covering it up too, just like they covered up the massacre in Las Vegas. That was the FBI that covered that up. Just like they covered up other things, the assassination of President Kennedy that was likely the result of CIA collaboration with the mafia and others. This is a big worldwide crisis. This could really affect the course of history and mankind. It's happened before in world history. And we need to fight back now legally to uncover the cause and to bring legal actions to get compensation for the victims. So contact Freedom Watch, not just to support us. You can go to freedomwatchusa.org and support us, our Justice League. We're going to need a good war chest to fight this. But also, we will, and this is the appropriate use of Freedom of Information Act, we will seek the truth from the American government as to what it knows and when they knew it. They probably knew it before this thing hit. So I urge you to do that. I want you to share this podcast. You can find it at radioamerica.com, at freedomwatchusa.org, at iTunes, at Spotify, at Patreon, at Amazon Fire, at Roku. You can find it everywhere. Share it. This needs to get out there. We just can't sit there like sitting ducks and do nothing. So I want to thank you for listening to me. I want God to protect you and your family, protect my family. God bless you. God bless your family. God save America, because we need to act. We just can't sit around. And that's the difference between Freedom Watch and other groups, even my former public interest group, which I founded, Judicial Watch. We act first. We act with force, legally and peacefully, and we'll get the job done. So thank you for listening to me. Please share this. And again, you can find it at radioamerica.com, freedomwatchusa.org, iTunes, Spotify, Patreon, Amazon Fire, Roku, and elsewhere. Get the word out before it's too late. I'll be back tomorrow with another special podcast.